Hey, that was the Sadler Brothers with their hit single, Joint Operations.
Hopefully it sounds better this time. I did a little tutorial. I've never mixed music before. This is something that we recorded that theme song. I played guitar, bass, Brady played drums and keyboard. We could just write a little ditty for this podcast, and we recorded ourselves. So the first time was kind of just like the raw mix. But I spent some time mixing it and mastering it, so hopefully it sounds a little better.
Yeah, and I bought a new mic, so this episode should sound a little more professional.
This is only the second episode, and we're already...
Yeah, it's episode 2.
Yeah, this is episode 2 of the Joint Operations podcast, because he started off you were just talking about the music, but This is actually the Joint Operations podcast, if you weren't aware.
Yes, and this is episode 2, Undead Air. Dead Air. We're talking about zombies, because I've been in Go ahead.
There was going to be a lot of references, I think, to the Always Sunny in Philadelphia when they're trying to start a podcast, because it's funny. That show's funny, but yeah.
There's no need to preface that. That's going to
not everybody is aware.
So the reason we decided to do a zombie themed podcast was it's close to Halloween. I don't know if anybody else has this thing. Adam and I have this shared quirk where our obsessions sort of go seasonal, where it's in the spring we might be like super into comic books, or it's like summertime, so it's fantasy time. But it seems like every year the Halloween season is zombies for me, at least, but also horror movies. So
it hasn't hit me yet. I think it's because it's so hot outside. Like once it starts cooling off a little bit, I think I'll be more in that mood. But I mean, I always like horror stuff, so
yeah, it's also probably worse for me because when this episode launches on the 17th, what is today, Tuesday, September 17th, I believe, that's when this is launching when you're hearing this. And a week after this episode launches, my book Relic Myers and the Rhythms of Ruin comes out. It's gonna be available everywhere.
You wrote a book?
I wrote a book. It's my first, not my first novel, my first horror novel, and everybody listening to this is in the process of looking it up to make sure they know when to buy it. But when they listen to next week's episode, that's when I'll tell them to actually buy it. So you have some time to save up some money.
Thanks for giving them the warning at least.
So because hopefully that's the last you'll hear me just completely always plugging this thing, because it's consuming my life trying to marketing a book. If anybody hasn't done that, don't do it. I do not enjoy marketing a book. It just feels dirty.
I mean, that's honestly what, like, one of the biggest turnoffs I had with our previous jobs was just working, kickstarting board games, trying to get people to come back your board games. Just
look at that thing I made.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with like applying for jobs, stuff like that. I hate trying to sell myself. I don't really want to just talk about why you should pay attention to me or like my stuff.
Yeah, some people are lucky enough where they have marketers and people are marketing stuff for them, but we're still at that level where we just have to market ourselves if we want to rise above in that one category we're working on at the time. But we work around so many different things that it's hard to market all of them. But anyway,
what's the first thing you think of when it's this time of year and you're in that mood for zombies or horror, Halloween stuff? What's the first thing that pops in your mind that you want to watch?
Watching wise, I always go back to The Walking Dead, which is is poignant because we'll have some talking about The Walking Dead on this episode. But
now, what's that about?
Walking Dead?
I'm joking.
It's about people running around. No,
bickering. People bickering.
Yeah, a lot of people. Like Sarah, my wife, does not enjoy drama and anxious drama in shows and movies, which is funny because that's what makes the best stories, is like lots of drama, people fighting. But she doesn't do Walking Dead very well, so I have to watch that one on my own. But it's always been one of my favorites. But I mean, I don't always feed that need to want to see it. I just want to relive that feeling of when I first watched that show. But yeah, lately I've just been craving horror movies. How about you?
I mean, I always go back. I've gone back to watch Walking Dead multiple times, but every time I do, I hit a certain point where I'm like a little sick of it. I think there's a slow part. I think it's after season 3. Like when they hit the prison.
Season 3 is the prison, but I think the problem is they drag the governor plot line out
also
too much.
Late in that show, they got to the point where every episode they had a montage of everybody looking in the
Slow
distance,
music.
slowly. Everybody in slow motion. It's like every character's reaction to something. It's like, I get it. It's a dramatic scene. I don't need to see this every single episode.
Let's contemplate all the stuff we're dealing with and put some really slow music over it.
Yeah, but I think for me, on top, besides that, is I like going back to watch old horror movies a lot. So I think that I don't know if there's anything specific that is the first thing I think of. Maybe like the Conjuring movies. I like those. I like watching The Conjuring.
The Conjuring feels insanely nostalgic for something that I've only just got into. I think like 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago.
It's been longer than that.
Really?
Time flies, man.
Yeah, it feels like recent, but I didn't like grow up with it. But it still feels like super nostalgic for some reason. It had to have been a couple years ago. It can't be that much. That far.
The most recent one came out a couple years ago.
Well, I know, but I didn't get into it till late. I came into it late.
Yeah,
so.
but it's been at least like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, lately I've been doing a lot of reading in horror. I've been reading a lot of Stephen King does a lot of horror, but I've been reading his Dark Tower series, which is less horror. It's just weird fantasy. But I've also been reading some more like young adult indie horror. I'm reading Jay Bauer's Cadaverous book because somebody recommended it to me. It's a book about a kid who, without spoiling it, a kid who makes a deal with a demon for his band to get famous. It's pretty interesting, but it's weird because as much as I love, like, obviously I like band stuff because that's what Relic Myers is about. This one felt like I wasn't sure if Jay's been in a band or if he'd been around bands, but it didn't seem very authentic from that point of view. And I could be wrong just from my own experiences, but that part of it is kind of like, but the story itself is pretty cool.
Being in a band is not that great.
No, it's not, but it's, I mean, that's the thing. It's this seems a little more like romanticized, and I'm just not sure if it's based on like actual experiences, but it could be. It's just everyone has different experiences with band stuff, so I could be way off.
I mean, I do miss playing music with a band. That was really fun, but then there's all that stuff like playing shows and moving gear, and I'm too old for that.
Yeah, it's got its place. Place and time, I should say, and I'm done with it as well. But it was fun. We have some undead rotting things to talk about in both tabletop and video games. What are we gonna start with? Tabletop or video games? Because
if we're following the trend from last episode, we start with tabletop games.
I guess I guess that's more pressing because that's stuff that we're actually working on. Video games are more just our recreation, but yeah, for tabletop games, I think we talk about two main things for this episode because we're talking about zombies.
Well, yeah, I think you can touch on two main things, but I think the introduction should be talking about just horror board games that we know of, we've played, have anything to talk about or opinions on them, and then we'll get those two bigger topics that you have planned out.
Yeah. Horror gaming is weird because I remember there's a lot of different philosophies. This is coming from a design standpoint because people talk about how you design horror in games because so much of horror is based on the unknown, and it's very hard with board games to like make like complete horror like scary experiences. But to me, like, horror and scary stuff is kind of different because horror is just that it's the atmosphere and that vibe. And a good example of that is for anybody who's familiar with some newer games out there, there's a game called Final Girl. It's based on all those movie tropes, slashers, and any paranormal movies. But it's not like a scary game. It's a fun solo game where you're just playing as the final girl trying to survive whatever killers after you. But it's the atmosphere. It's the scenery, and just you're kind of living out those tropes that you've seen in horror movies, which is cool.
I think going back to when we first, I think one of the first board games I bought when we were in our probably like early 20s, maybe late teen years, where we played Warhammer through our teenage years. We went right to the hobby stuff after we got into Hero Quest. We went into like the hobby war games, but then we started getting back into like actual just boxed board games. And I remember going to the game store and we saw that little beer and pretzels game Zombies with a few exclamation points. I remember buying that like as on a whim, and because zombies are cool, and that kind of was the first, I think, horror board game I remember playing. I think.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah. Well, I mean, when we were younger, I thought there was like another, like not like there's like Clue had a weird creepy vibe.
I mean, 13 Dead and Dry was
same thing. It's a similar thing where it's like a kind of a creepy.
Omega Virus. That was kind of horror-ish.
That was a horror,
sci-fi horror.
Yeah, I would call that horror. But there was that one, the VHS. We didn't own it, but our neighbor had that VHS quote unquote board game called Fear or something, where some guy in a cloak yelling at you. but I don't remember like what the gameplay.
I think we
was
just
like.
watched the tape one time and just made fun of it. I don't think we actually played it.
Yeah, very bizarre game. But the zombies game.
I do think the zombies game kind of like set some expectation of something we wanted in a game where we kind of designed something early on that was very much like that, but it was like sci-fi themed on a spaceship. But we were always looking for that game that was kind of like the what do you call it, like more robust experience that zombies game provided, where it's like, slow zombies in a city going around exploring, finding equipment, weapons, and all that stuff. I mean, there's not a lot. People always say there's lots of zombie games out there, but there's not a lot of like good classic zombie games that. Let's take the most obvious example, Zombicide, when that first came out. Back when I think we were still working at FFG when that first Kickstarter was going on.
That's Zombicide from Simon or Come On? I forget.
Simon.
Yeah, I forget how they want to pronounce it.
Come on, man.
Come on. It used to be Cool Mini or Not, but
I don't know I just always hear people say Simon, so I don't know if there's a proper way to say it, but Cool Mini or Not. They were Cool Mini or Not when they did that first version of Zombicide. And it was a well-produced game. It's clearly successful. They've had so many different versions of it. They had second edition, they had the Black Plague, they had the sci-fi version. But that game is really just like, it's kind of like that Left 4 Dead mentality where it's like crazy amounts of tons of zombies and all kinds of guns and rack up a kill count, see how many zombies you can kill.
Yeah, it's taking the angle where, like, because there's two, and I think we'll get deeper into this in the discussion after we're done talking about board games and tabletop games, because I want to talk about zombies in general. But it takes that mindset of people like zombies because it's like there's no emotion in killing these things because they're just husks essentially. So let's just have a bunch of these things people can kill. But I've never liked that, and we'll talk more about what the preferences are. But your comment about like slow zombies and the right type of zombie game, and like people saying there's zombies are too overdone, and it's funny because as much as we like zombies, well maybe me because I used to love watching like Night of the Living Dead. Like I'd fall asleep to that movie when I was younger, and I just always had this weird thing about zombies. I've loved them.
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved zombies.
Resident Evil probably triggered that obsession maybe with me, but I think the craving that I've always had is very rarely been satisfied, because you mentioned zombies with the exclamation points, which is by Twilight Creation Studio. Then there was the other big one, which was Last Night on Earth by Flying Frog when that came out.
That one I thought nailed the theme really well. I have no idea why it was designed as a 1 versus many, because I don't know anybody who wants to play as the zombie.
Yeah, that was going to be my point, because it was so close, but at the same time, it didn't really lean into what could make it work well, because in my opinion, a zombie theme is like the optimal game to have a cooperative experience, because it's the living people versus these dead husks, and having somebody control those dead husks. Like, why do you want to do that?
Yeah, even if it had some competitive nature, because obviously the zombie movies have people bickering and arguing with each other about supplies or what the best decision is, who's going to be the leader. All that stuff could still work, but like, why would you want to play the zombie?
Yeah,
and that goes back to like the video games too, Left 4 Dead, where they had that versus mode where I don't want to play zombies, I want to play the guys shooting the zombies.
Yeah, and your point about people having some competition, even when you're trying to cooperate, there have been games that kind of lean into that as well, like the Plaid Hat games that did really well. What was that called? The zombie
winter one.
Yeah, why can't I think of the name of that? That's
Dead Winter or Winter or something.
I think
Dead of Winter.
I think it was the Dead of Winter. It's weird. I totally spaced on that name, but that was a very popular game.
Because you played too many games.
Yeah, and I thought that game was cool, but it leaned on that whole like hidden agenda trader mechanic, which I've just never really liked in tabletop games. I mean, there's a time and place for it, and I have enjoyed certain games like that, but I never. If somebody suggests a game, it's like, oh, it's got a hidden trader. Like, nah, no thanks, I'll be fine. It really leaned into that concept of not being able to trust your people you're working with, your colleagues, and I forget if that came out before or after our game. I want to say after.
I think it was after. I don't remember for sure. I'd have to look at the Board Game Geek.
It might have been close, but the thing is like they were different territories. Like even if I had played Dead of Winter when we were designing The Walking Dead, I don't think it would have factored in of how I thought the design should go, because kind of get into The Walking Dead No Sanctuary, we can kind of talk about how we got into that project or where it came from.
Yeah, this was our first. I think only. No, we haven't really done a horror game since then, have we?
Well, we had our hand in the Dire Alliance, but I don't know if it's ever going to come out.
Yeah, let's not talk about that one.
Yeah.
Sorry, David and Trevor.
Yeah.
Can't apologize enough for that one.
Hopefully something happens with it, but who knows?
Yeah, so we were commissioned by Cryptozoic Games to, I guess, contracted, not commissioned. We were contracted to design a board game based off of the Walking Dead IP. Which was actually the show, not the comic book.
Yeah,
not the books.
Which at the time is insane, because when we were talking to the publisher, there were a few different projects that were up in the air, because they were just coming off of their crowdfunding campaign for the Ghostbusters game, which oddly enough was very similar to the Zombicide, that style of gameplay. So when we were like kind of going over the possibilities of different IPs that Cryptozoic had, because they had so many licensing deals. They had some connections with different entertainment companies, so they had a lot of options. But when we saw The Walking Dead, we're like, that's it. Because at the time, that was like, what, season 2 or 3? Or I forget what season they were on.
No, it was like 3 or 4.
It was because
it's been around for a while.
Yeah.
Because there was definitely the
the prison stuff. Yeah, I remember that. But yeah,
Woodbury.
When we had the chance to do that, it was kind of at my peak of my my interest in that show. Sorry if I coughed into the mic. I don't know. But the excitement was really what motivated me to just dive into that design without even thinking about it. Like, we didn't have a lot of discussions about how we thought it would go. We just knew it had to have miniatures, it had to have dice because we like those things. And I like decks of cards, so I had to have some decks of cards in there.
I think that was convenient too, because I was actually living at your house at that time when we took that deal, because I think that was right after I was going through my divorce. So I was like, okay, well, I don't want to go buy a new house right now, so I'm just going to live at your house and work on this game. So we actually worked at the same company, or you might have.
Yeah, we were. Yeah.
I don't know if you switched jobs yet or not, but we were proposal writers and worked from home, so we could spend free time working on this game.
Yeah.
And go on. What were you saying?
Well, no, I was going to say the design came together pretty quick because of that. And one of the, I think the conscious thing we wanted to do was explore different ways to have the same kind of experiences you might have with hidden trader games or trader mechanics, but just building those into like resource management mechanics into a co-op game, where in examples you have cards you can play that might hurt your fellow players, but it's really convenient for you to play at this time, but having limited communication, so I can't tell you to make you prepare for this thing I'm going to do. That really kind of created atmosphere. If you're thinking of being a character in this world, like, Rick's over there doing something, you're not sure what he's thinking or doing because it's a crisis situation, and he does something that's very beneficial in his situation, but it really puts you at a disadvantage. Trying to create that in a board game environment isn't necessarily easy, especially in a cooperative game. So we had to build this system of card play, and kind of, what was the I should have looked at the rule book before we started recording, but there was a mechanic in there that was the trust. There was stress too. So stress, if you did something that stressed other people out, you could there was also leadership. So you have leadership, and if people did what you suggested, you could keep your leadership, but if they didn't follow your orders, it would stress you out, and eventually you would lose leadership, so someone else would get it, and people had leadership bonuses and stuff. Yeah.
So the problem was with this game is we had so many ideas that it turned into too many rules.
Yeah.
Something that you learn, early in game design is after you design a few games is you need to start cutting out, they call them kill your babies. It's like something you really like about a game, but it just makes it too complicated. I think that Walking Dead No Sanctuary suffered from that a bit, where we had a lot of cool ideas, but we didn't have the time to actually trim them down to what the most important things were. What should we focus on in this game? So there was basically just a lot of cool ideas that overly complicated the game, I think.
Yeah, but I think the complications came more from the type, because there's types of currencies, which again, you can find ways to mitigate the types of currencies people have to keep track of. So I think that's the biggest place where the complexities come in, because that puts a strain on whoever's doing the graphics or the UI to make those things different enough. So it's like something that probably would have worked really well in a video game, but with a kind of a mass market board game, I think that probably would make it suffer more. But that being said, it's still one of my favorite designs because there's so many choices during a turn.
I also think there was miscommunication with the publisher, because when we submitted the prototype, we should have said, "Hey, don't use these icons. These were just for our prototypes. We just pulled them in Google, Google Slides or whatever."
Yeah, and we don't know how, because like our experience at the time was only through what we learned at FFG, so we knew how FFG operated. We had no idea how any other publishers operated with their production teams and how they communicated with the design teams and the development. So so we've learned a lot since then, so we could be more proactive in those kind of communications. But
what was there was a little a token in that game, like was it the trust meter or whatever?
It was like the morale token, I think.
Yeah, it was like microscopic. Yeah. I was like, how are
it was almost like they forgot to put, like, let's put that in there real quick. And I mean, it they got the job done, but it's like you just use a bead or something instead. But I think the overall it's one of those things where, like, that game, I don't have anything that I would necessarily change that much, except for I would want to take a stronger hand in advising the UI, the graphics, and just the final touches on that game, because it was a cool design. The cards, I think, going back to just that whole leadership mechanic too, where like there's 3 suits of cards, like the different approaches: reckless, cautious, or normal. And whatever your leader does, you have to follow suit. And if you don't, you're going to cause stress, and it just causes group tension. And
there's trust, right? It's trust and stress, and
there was trust. I think trust was if you was what triggered your abilities. You could like use trust to like use abilities, and I'd have to, again, I should have read the rules before doing this discussion, but you get the idea. There's a lot of cool concepts, but I think that does add to the complexity. So it's more of a hobby level game as opposed to just a mass market tie-in licensed game.
And that also goes back to what we talked about last time with licensed games, and my problem with that is a lot of times you're just recreating things that happen. Like in Walking Dead, for example, there's a bunch of scenarios that you want to design, but they're supposed to be like mirroring what the show does.
Yeah,
people want that experience. And so it's like there are a lot of like, what if, okay, let's say this is what happens in the show, but what if something else happens? So you're kind of following it, but you're just putting them in a situation that's similar and saying, let's see how this plays out.
Yeah.
Typically, we like to, when we design scenario games, we like to have more of like build your own scenarios where it's like, oh, you can take this element and combine them in different ways to create a new experience, as opposed to like a scripted scenario.
Yeah, I think people when they expect to play through the story, I think really what they expect is they want to see those key moments played out. They want to see, like, for example, when I think episode 2, or 2 or 3 of the first season, when the Vatos have the guns, and there's that like conflict of who gets to the bag first. It's like you don't have to play that out exactly as the episode did, but you have those little elements there that people can have that callback and they know what the reference is. So it's just about knowing how much and how little to add. But yeah, that's still one of my favorite designs we've done, and it happens to be one of my favorite IPs, which is nice. But I think it's no longer my favorite zombie game, because I've played some great zombie games since then on the tabletop.
Before you go into what your favorite one is, probably there was also the Mantic Games.
That's what I was going to talk about.
The Walking Dead.
Yeah, that was one of my favorites.
All Out War. That was designed by Mark, right? Mark Latham.
Mark Latham, yeah.
We worked with Mark on another project. Again, sorry for Mark for getting involved in that project. Mark designed Lasting Tales, which was a game that we were super excited about, but we have no idea if it's ever going to.
Based on my book series, based on my fantasy book series, so it might not happen, but something will happen with that idea.
It was basically my kind of dream game. It was like a fantasy co-op skirmish game. It was like
which comes around kind of full circle, because the other topic we're talking about in this discussion.
It's all related. But The Walking Dead from Mantic was really cool. I liked a lot about that. I love the product model they had.
It was amazing.
The only reason why I liked this other game we're talking about better is because in The Walking Dead, you're just playing the characters. And when I'm playing a game, like a tabletop skirmish game, I kind of want to make my own characters, like kind of like a role-playing game.
Yeah.
I like that kind of freedom.
I think the Walking Dead All Out War did so many things right, because it almost had the structure like X-Wing, the miniatures game that FFG did, where the packaging was kind of similar actually, but when you got the core set for The Walking Dead, it could be played solo, co-op, or competitively, which was great. But then it had this like little solo to learn to play box that was the governor, like Road to Woodbury, where you play as the governor on his journey to Woodbury, and it's just 3 little scenarios to learn the game. It was amazingly well produced.
I like the miniatures. Those are some of Mantic's best miniatures. I think they're nice and chunky. I love the style and the scale.
I still use those miniatures. I still have them all painted. I use all those zombie miniatures for all my zombie tabletop games, like the one we're about to talk about now, which we'll shift over because one thing I wanted to discuss during this segment is my favorite zombie tabletop game currently, and it is called County Road Z by my buddy Jordan Heckman. And it is, I think it just came out this year, right? This spring?
From Modifius Entertainment. It was a new printing, right? Like,
yeah, it's a very awesome little digest book, great size. I highly recommend it if you like tabletop skirmish, you like zombies, if you just want to read a cool wargaming book. This is an awesome one.
Also, you should give an overview of what it is actually. It's a tabletop. It's a book. It's a rule book, tabletop miniatures. Miniature agnostic game, which means you can use whatever miniatures you want. So, for example, if you had the Walking Dead box, which Brady does, would use those miniatures for this game because they work perfectly. But you really just need some survivor miniatures and some zombie miniatures, and then some cool terrain, obviously.
Yeah, and when
for those who don't know, a tabletop war skirmish game, you play it on your tabletop. You put a mat down or some kind of way to delineate where the edges of the game board are, and then you put some terrain out. You can use whatever you want, but there's people that actually make pre-painted MDF laser cut terrain.
Black Site Studios is a great one because honestly, this company also did miniatures for County Road Z, like the official miniatures. So they're a great company as well.
And I want to explain a little bit more for people who might not even have any experience with this at all. But you measure movement around with it like a tape measure. You roll dice to resolve things according to the rules. But that's kind of what a tabletop war game is for those who might not know.
Yeah.
And that's what this game is. It's just a rule book you can buy. It's like $20 or $30.
Yeah, I think it's like 25 or 30. I forget.
It's a nice hardback book, digest size. That's what it is. But go on.
Yeah, and this specific one is co-op and solo geared, so it's very much modeled after a game we'll talk about later, State of Decay 2. That's a video game, so it's kind of modeled after that, where it's more like almost like a zombie simulator, where it's simulating a zombie apocalypse from having a base, managing your community, going out on supply runs. It's trying to capture all of that, which is also like The Walking Dead. It's like episodes of The Walking Dead. But we use this term. We should probably define this term real quick. It might make sense to a lot of people, but just in case, miniatures agnostic. It's a popular term nowadays with some of these miniatures games because it's just a book, like you said. Miniatures agnostic means you use whatever minis you have on hand, which I think you might have specified, but just to be clear, that's what agnostic means.
It's because so many games these days have miniatures, and you can buy miniatures from so many different places. You can go to Hero Forge, for example, which is a website where you can design your own miniature and just have it printed out. You can have a buddy that has a 3D printer, print out your miniatures. So there's so many ways to get miniatures now. There's a lot of companies that just let's make some game rules that people can use their miniatures collection with, which I appreciate because I have a large miniatures collection because I like to play a bunch of different miniatures games.
Yeah, and I have a bunch of Walking Dead minis that I painted for the All Out War game when I was playing through that. So it came in handy when I got this copy of County Road Z, which I actually picked it up either a year ago or maybe a year and a half ago because I got it when Jordan just shared it on, I think I saw his post on a Reddit post one time, and he shared like a Google document. So I checked it out. I was looking for some sort of zombie co-op solo tabletop game because I had a lot of scenery from Black Site Studios I was buying just because I liked putting together those buildings. So I had a little diner that I got from, I think it was like Foreground or something, whatever that company was. And then I've got a bunch of buildings like a cabin from Black Site Studio, all kinds of different terrain. But I needed to have a cool game to play it, and that's where I found County Road Z. And it really captures that episodic feel where you have a group of like 3 or 4 people and you name them, you give them, little personalities and some stats, and you manage a base. Like, for example, you start off in a small house that your first mission is to go capture that house and clear out the zombies. It feels very cinematic in that way. And if this was a video cast, we'd play through a little scenario and we'd show you how it all works, but we don't have the cool setup for that. but it's a very cool narrative game, and I'm happy to say that Jordan is open to working with us on a project, a joint operation, you might say. It's a little more fantasy oriented, which we might talk about soon when it's further along, but we're just glad that he wants to work with us because we love his County Road Z game. It's awesome.
Yeah, I've only played this one once with Brady because I just now got the book with the new edition that Modifius did. Because the old one, was it Modifius did the old one?
Or? No, it was just he did himself. Jordan just published himself. Okay. It was through Drive-Through RPG.
Yeah, and Brady had the books, and I we played. I think we played that scenario he was talking about where we were clearing out a house. And there's lots of things I liked about the game. I liked there's this mechanic where the zombies, if they're not like hungry, if they haven't eaten in a while, they kind of go into this like passive state where they're just kind of like standing around. But then if you hear you, because things make noise in the game, if they hear you and they're aware of you, they become hungry and they start chasing you, and so they activate. So you can kind of sneak around these zombies that are kind of just, lumbering around. And if you ever played State of Decay 2, you've probably seen this before, where the zombies aren't really doing much. They're just kind of walking around, not really paying attention to you. You can sneak up and just stab them in the head.
Yeah.
But then if they see you, then they start running like, ah!
Yeah, it captures that whole horde mechanic, because in a way, that's one of my things from a design standpoint when we were making The Walking Dead. I thought it was kind of boring, where you set up the game, you put all these miniatures out, but then all when the zombies move, they just all move toward you. So it's like, it felt tedious and boring where you're just like moving all these zombies along the board. This kind of fixes that, where they're set up sort of like obstacles, like these, like they're just like terrain. You just place them all out, kind of spread out.
Threat beacons.
Yeah, so like if they're just sitting there, it's fine. But if you do like random rolls once in a while, a zombie might bump into another one, and then that triggers them, and they'll start moving around randomly, and they might happen to catch where you are. So it captures that chaos pretty well. So
it also the other thing I like about it, it has the RPG feel that I like in skirmish games, especially campaign skirmish games, where you can make your own character. You can give them skills, develop those skills over the course of several missions. Maybe they'll die, or maybe they'll get turned into zombies. They get infected or whatever. Those are always cool, because I grew up playing games like Necromunda and Mordheim, things like that, where these games where you have a little campaign, so over the course of the game, you guys might get injured, they might lose an eye, they all of a sudden they can't shoot as well. That's always fun to play through campaigns. I mean, we did that recently with Frostgrave. We had a Necromunda campaign recently, which was fun. But that's what this does too. It gives you, and you're able to play it solo, so you can kind of do your own campaign by yourself if you don't have anybody to play with, which is cool.
Yep. Keep it up, Jordan. That's a great book, and we highly recommend you pick it up. It's awesome. But that's our tabletop world. Unless you had something else tabletop related that I'm leaving out.
Not off the top of my head. No.
Yeah, in our own projects, we talked about it a little bit last week. We were talking about doing the Relic Myers board game. Just haven't had a ton of time this week to work on that, or this past week. But yeah, still moving that along. Just waiting to meet with Richard again. But yeah, we'll keep you guys posted on how that one's going. In the meantime, I would like to talk a little bit about the wait we had to endure for Space Marine 2. We were trying to fill time. We had beat the Diablo 4 season. We were like cleared it out. Waiting for Space Marine 2, and we were just thinking about what can we play to kill some time. And then randomly, because I never thought I could get you to play again, but we started playing State of Decay 2, because that game consumed my life for almost 2 years straight, from like 2020 when the pandemic happened, and then like 2 years after that, I finally got like a little bit burnt out, took a break from it. But to kind of like give a overview, State of Decay 2, obviously the sequel to State of Decay, which I've never played, but apparently it had a pretty good following. State of Decay 2 came out, I believe, in 2015, I want to say. So it's not super old. I mean, it's almost a decade old, I guess, by now. But in video game life, I've been playing GTA 5 for longer. So, but anyway, State of Decay 2 is a zombie simulator, zombie apocalypse simulator, where you play as a community of survivors, randomized survivors with random stats and random perks and penalties, and you're trying to pretty much just survive in a sandbox world. You pick a map. It's kind of a quasi open world map, but they're not huge. They're pretty limited in size. But you go around, scrounge around for materials. You go back to your base to build upgrades. You try to become self-sufficient, and you can choose to complete your leader's story and like finish the map and quote unquote win the game, or you can just do what a lot of players do and have a forever community where you just survive for as long as you can. Now that's kind of the single player overview of the game. There's also a cooperative way to play the game, which we're not crazy about.
Well, I will say that this game is very close to being like almost the perfect zombie game. Like it does everything that we would want in a zombie game, as far as like theme and gameplay. It's like it's mainly just about scavenging of supplies. dealing with, they're mostly slow zombies. They can kind of move fast, but they're not like,
Yeah, they stumble. There's like stumbling, so it's like you still have to kind of avoid them.
It's cool because if there's a horde of zombies going on walking down the street, you can sneak up behind them and you can stealthily stab each of them in the head. Like it feels realistic in the fact that you can deal with zombies in different ways, where you're not just like unloading an assault rifle into just a big horde of zombies. You can do that. Yeah, you can. But it makes no sense usually because the ammo is limited. You can make ammo and you can find a lot of ammo, but you don't want. Sorry, I was scratching my beard. You don't want to use all your ammo just on a random horde of zombies.
Yeah, so the great thing, though, is that sandbox nature where you can pretty much live out any sort of like zombie survival fantasy you want to do because the game allows for it.
And there's a real satisfying flow to the game where you go and you like scout out areas. And if you go into a house, for example, you'll see like 4 or 5 rooms on your little mini map, little radar, and you'll see that they're unknown. You don't know if it's clear or not, so you have to go through every room before you make sure it's safe. There might be zombies lying around. So once you go through every room and make sure you take care of all the zombies, all of a sudden the map has this little light, ring around it and saying, okay, well, this area is secure. You've secured this area. You can loot it, and then once you loot all the little containers that are there, the icon goes dim, so you know that you've cleared out that house. So you can kind of clear out the whole map that way, which is really satisfying and a completionist mindset.
Yeah, it has that kind of that checking off feel to it, and it's cool too because of the sandbox nature of the map. You can choose like where you want your base to be. I mean, there's like a fixed number of bases. Like there's like, oh, this map has the park ranger tower as one of the bases, or you can go take over this road stop inn or the fire station. But each of those
the fire station was cool.
Yeah, but each of those maps have tons of little houses and tons of little what they call outposts, where you can like take over a gas station and you can claim an outpost. Depending on what level your base is, you can have different numbers of outposts, but it's a place where you can like stash more of your gear. You can switch out some of your survivors, but to get through this map, you have to have vehicles. You got to repair cars. You got to gas them up. So a lot of upkeep and maintenance, which sounds tedious. I think people might like, oh, it's tedious, but that's the fun of the game. I love having to like manage my gas, manage my bullets, manage all these different supplies.
Yeah, with the limited resources that the map provides. Now, all that being said, when I said it's pretty much like the perfect zombie game, there are a few things that make it so I just don't play it much anymore. One of the biggest things is the way that co-op works in the game. It's awesome that the game supports co-op, so you can play with your friends. However, you have your own communities. So like if I'm playing co-op and I have my community, I can radio in for Brady to come help me. He brings in one of his survivors from his community, and he's just helping me in my map. And so he's finding stuff, and he's basically just benefiting my community, but he has no attachment to the community at all. And
now thematically, I like that because it's like, it's kind of like this, I'm going to swoop in and just come into your world, but there's so many limitations to that.
Especially for new players. Like, for example, if you want me to play in your world, I have to go start a game, and I have to make sure I have a survivor that has enough stuff to come help you. Yeah. Like, I can find stuff in your world, but I should come with equipment that is useful to you.
Yeah, also, it kind of eliminates, it eliminates the co-op nature of so many aspects of the game, because what you're getting co-op combat, you're getting co-op driving, kind of, like you can ride in the same cars and stuff, but like you're not getting cooperative scavenging, you're not getting cooperative map completion, you're not getting cooperative base building. So
you're also tethered too. Like you can only go so far away from the host. Yeah. So it's like if I go into Brady's room or Brady's if I go into Brady's map or world or whatever, I'm basically limited to a certain distance away from his character, and if he goes too far away, I get tethered to him, which is kind of takes you out of it. The other aspect that's kind of related to this is the fact that you're just playing a random survivor, and you if he dies, you go to the next one. I would much prefer a game like this to make my own character, and in a shared community with my friends who we all play as these survivors. This is me. I'm taking the role of this guy, and I can make myself a doctor or a sewer, like a plumber, or a cop or what, you know, you had your job before the outbreak and you have these skills, I would be way more excited about and invest in a game like that.
Yeah, and it's funny because even if they let you just choose a character, but like that's who you play as, you don't get to swap between all these different. Because like playing as your whole community takes away that cool aspect they could have, where you have to manage relationships with your community members. You know, you're playing as this one character, and I have to manage my relationship with Kevin over there. Kevin keeps eating all of our food and not telling anybody about it, and I've started watching him closer. So you could have cool mechanics like that in the game, but they lose it because you're just playing as everybody, and I don't really want that either. So there are some lots of downsides to how they do co-op, but like Adam said, it's nice they actually have it, because we had some fun playing it while I waited for Space Marines. So
yeah, it's weird because it's a game that every time I play it, I'm enjoying it while I'm playing it, but it feels like I'm limited to how much I can play it, because once I don't know, it always leaves me wanting more. Yeah. I want this other experience. I want the same gameplay, the same graphics. Everything about it is great. Like, also, we didn't mention this, but there's other types of zombies. Like there's the screamers and the bloaters and the juggernauts. Like when you come across a juggernaut in the wilderness that you're not ready for, it's terrifying.
Yeah. They're in like playing on the higher difficulties. Like we play kind of the normal difficulties, but when I was playing my solo games during the pandemic, I was playing on lethal mode.
Oh yeah, you made me come in and help you on too.
Yeah, when you play lethal mode, it is insane how difficult it is. Like there's a thing in the game called Blood Plague, where it's like this kind of red mist that takes over different areas of the map, and there are zombies that are like blood plague zombies, and if they hit you, you get the blood plague and you just start getting sick, and you might turn into a zombie if you don't find a cure soon enough, and it just makes it so much more stressful, but it's still really, really fun.
I also think that's why I stopped playing back when we were playing on PC, because I lost so many survivors helping you in your game. I was like, every time I came to help them, I would lose a survivor. I'm like, I'm done.
It's a nightmare. It's so hard, but that's kind of the appeal of it. But yeah, that's State of Decay 2, and this summer, I think actually in June I think it was, they had an Xbox showcase. And finally, I think 2020, they showed the first teaser of State of Decay 3, which is like just a little cinematic teaser trailer.
Had no game information whatsoever.
Yeah. All it showed was a woman in the snowy woods. So it showed there's weather or different like weather environments, and a zombie bear attacked her. So it showed like, okay, or no, a zombie deer. I think it was a zombie deer growled.
Some animal, zombified animal.
So it's showing like, okay, now there's gonna be zombie animals. So that's all it really showed, and that's kind of a bummer. That's all we had for like 4 years. But this year they showed another clip. This one, it was still like kind of cinematic, but it showed these angles that it felt like it was close to gameplay, just without the UI, without like actual overlay. So it was just kind of like this gameplay cinematic, but it was really cool because it kind of conveyed a lot of things that I was hoping. It conveyed shared communities, because they confirmed that afterwards. So it's going to be multiplayer, cooperative, in the same world, shared world. They have Obsidian, which did Grounded, which is an amazing game. They have them helping with the shared world aspect of the game, which is great news because they did a great job with Grounded. And it also really hinted at playing as your own character and having like this legacy aspect where if you lose a character, there's some kind of like shrine in your base where some object from your character shows up there. So it's kind of a memorial of who you lost over the course of the game. So that's more of an assumption based on what they've showed. But the fact that they're doing shared communities, the game can be whatever else after that. I think it's going to be great just because of the shared community aspect.
Yeah, as long as they don't veer too far away from like the gameplay of State of Decay 2, because like I said, the gameplay itself is great. I think the only complaint I had with the gameplay was the sprinting was not like the normal, like, when you sprint in a game, it's always clicking in the thumbstick, but in this one, for some reason, it's the left bumper, and the gunplay wasn't too bad, but
the gunplay was awesome because of the skills. Like if you had like the gunslinging skill, it like snapped to the headshots, but
you like X did a melee attack, right? So if you didn't have your gun out, I'm used to reloading with X, so you have to have your gun out to reload. So that kind of threw me off sometimes. But other than that, like the gameplay itself is great. I love the gameplay. So if State of Decay 3 is just like very similar gameplay, but with those co-op multiplayer features expanded upon, and maybe you get to make your own character or at least play as the same, like you are one survivor, that would be
Yeah, I don't.
Ideal game.
I don't know for sure if it's make your own character. I assume it is, but from what they've shown and talked about, it very much seems like you're just playing as a character, which is great. But from that little video they showed, I think they showed those clips of the guy like sneaking up behind a zombie in the house and stabbing him in the head, and then it showed the girl with a shotgun at the gas station. It showed like her behind the shoulder gameplay view. So I think they're doing that just to show that it's the same game. You're getting the same combat experience. So I'm assuming that's the case. Maybe it's just wishful thinking, but but I agree. I really hope they keep all that the same.
Yeah, well, hopefully they show some more soon and maybe give an idea about when it's actually going to come out. Cause,
yeah, they just shut down actual support of State of Decay 2 this past week, which was weird news, but they said they're focusing solely on State of Decay 3. I'm not a video game developer, but I would hope that means they're just pushing forward to the a pretty near release date, but who knows? I don't know how those cycles go.
Video games take too long to make, which is unfortunate. Because it is, plus you have to reveal information like years in advance, and so you get people excited about a game, but then they're just you're just waiting for God who knows how long.
Yeah. To wrap up our video game discussion, though, I want more State of Decay games. I want more Project Zombicide style games, not that level of sim on
Project
Zombicide.
Zomboid.
Yeah, sorry, not Zombicide. Project Zomboid. We played that with our buddy Justin and Mitchell, and our buddies Justin and Mitchell, not our buddy Justin Mitchell,
Mr. Justin Mitchell.
But more games like that, cooperative, scavenging, like slow zombies, not too many more of these like shooters. Like Back 4 Blood was fine, Left 4 Dead was fine. I mean, they're fun games, but that's not what I want from zombies. I don't want piles and piles of zombies. I just
Zomboid, I like the concept of it, but I'm not. I know that, for example, Mitchell loves the aspect where you just hop in a world and try to survive.
No direction.
Yeah, I don't like that myself, because it just feels like, okay, we're gonna see how long we survive, and then what? I kind of like to have an objective that I'm going toward. Like the survival aspect is fine, but I like how it's done in State of Decay 2, where you have so many of these plague hearts on the map, and the overall goal is to clear these plague hearts out. Yeah, you can keep playing if you want, but at least there's a goal that I'm working. I'm a goal-oriented player. So
I like the organic goals that pop up too, where it's like little missions that say, "Oh, so and so called for some help with some gas or whatever." Like I like having little goals to do. That's why like those battle passes or season passes are so popular, because they give you little things to do, like little tiny things to chase, and those are fun.
There are other games. I think we mentioned this last time we were talking about Warhammer, but there's Warhammer 40k Darktide, which is kind of like the follow-up that Fat Shark did to Vermintide, which was the fantasy version. But it's like this Left 4 Dead style game. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Left 4 Dead, but it's a game
I'm familiar with it.
I know. I'm talking about listeners. There's a game years ago that is a Valve game, right? Valve did it first.
I think Valve was. Logo with the
it was a 4-player cooperative zombie game where you would just go through these scenarios of tons and tons of zombies, just to survive. It was kind of the biggest zombie game for years, but there's newer games that have followed that kind of formula. And Vermintide is a popular one because it was melee focused. It was really cool. Like I really enjoyed it. But then Warhammer 40k Darktide came out fairly recently, and it's kind of a zombie game because there's a bunch of Nurgle, plague bears.
There are some zombies, yeah.
Basically, you're fighting cultists, traitor guardsmen, plague. I'm for some reason I'm just drawing a total blank on.
Even though you say these names every time we
I
play.
talk about Warhammer all the time, but I'm drawing a blank on the Nurgle plague guys. But anyway,
they're just plague bearers, right? Like, aren't they just called plague bearers?
Probably. I'm just drawing a blank.
Poxwalkers.
Poxwalkers.
You're thinking
of Poxwalkers. Anyway. The gameplay on the game is fantastic. Like I love playing it. I wish there was a third person option. We kind of went on a rant about this last time.
Yeah.
But that's another game where I went back to play that after Space Marine came out, because Brady wasn't able to play Space Marine for whatever reason. So I was like, I'll just do a mission on Darktide, and reminded me how much fun that game was. So if you haven't checked that one out, I think it's on Game Pass.
If you haven't checked it out, don't check it out. We're going to protest until they add third person and ratlings to it.
Yeah,
so
that's check it out, but also just fill out a survey or contact Fat Shark.
I will
say, hey, I'll buy all your cosmetics if you just make it third person, so I can actually see those cosmetics on my character.
Yeah, and I'm gonna ask for a ratling every episode until. Sorry, no, I won't. I won't do that to you, but yeah. I do want one.
Get him a Ratling so he'll play with me, because I like that game.
I play it. It just first person gives me dizzy. I think it just
the older Brady gets, the more against first person is. I can play first person games.
I've never liked it though. Like it's not an age thing. Like I just never liked first. I played it out of necessity, but
I think the hatred has grown.
It's because every time there's a new game announced, it's like, oh look, it's a first person Indiana Jones game. Who wants to be first person Indiana Jones?
Yeah, that was a strange choice. Because I mean, having first person as an option, like Skyrim, for example, great. Have first person as an option, but also I want to see my character.
Yeah. That's a whole episode, probably. What's on the agenda after video games? Because we have like about 10 minutes to go, but I think I want to talk about the whole zombie.
Well,
too many zombies.
I don't even know if we had any questions we needed to answer, but
for the Q&A?
Well,
no. We do have a Q&A section. It's for me. Questions. Why don't you guys submit any questions? No, I'm just kidding because we didn't give much time. I just put it up yesterday, and we're recording early. So,
if you had any questions, we'll get them on the next episode. But there's also we can just talk about zombies in general, like the appeal of zombies.
Yeah, because that I think that's what triggered the idea for this episode, because I was like, what would you talk about, But I kept coming back to the fact that we played a lot of State of Decay 2, and I've been thinking a lot about zombie tabletop games, and it's Halloween. But we always hear this thing because people.
Well, let me ask you: what? Do you think zombies are overdone in games?
Yes. Yeah, but I have a condition on that. It's like, because it's one of those questions. It's kind of a faulty. What do you call that? It's
false equivalency.
No, it's not a false equivalency. There's like a false
loaded question,
false pretense to a question. There's a lot of politicians who say like I disagree with the
assumption.
Whatever. No, there's like
premise.
The premise. The premise. I disagree with the premise of the question, but because I do think zombies are overdone in a jokey way, like kind of as a lazy. I don't want to say lazy because it's a preference thing, but. Like the zombies that I want are definitely not overdone, because I want, like I said before, I want State of Decay, I want County Road Z, I want these zombie survival simulator type games where it's more about your character, their gear, the scavenging,
more about the survival aspects.
Yeah, slow zombies. I just hate. I go on these rants. I hate fast zombies so much. I mean, they make for good action movies. I know the 28 Days Later was very popular. It was a good movie. But, like, there's something about Night of the Living Dead. Because to me, my theory on this is the reason zombies are so popular is because they are sort of a perfect adversary. Because when you look at all these different... In real life, you see all these different types of beings. You have these animals. You have people. People are, like, the most dangerous beings on Earth. And if you take a person but rip out any empathy and any sort of compassion, anything, you have this husk of a person that all it wants is food. That's terrifying. Just so slow, like methodical, like not methodical.
Fortunately, they lose all their their wits.
yeah,
they're scheming.
But. Yeah, but it's also the numbers, because people in large numbers are scary, and they get ridiculous, and that's I think the whole zombie aspect. From like the George R. Romero standpoint, that's what really terrified me. And I think what hammered that home was our experience playing Resident Evil, or your experience watching me play Resident Evil.
Yeah, I think the survival aspect is what's missing sometimes, because, for example, like the example I used with Left 4 Dead, which was like, I think that was the first like fast zombie horde zombie game that came out. It's not really
that popularized that whole, like, even though I think 28 Days Later came out before that, I think like Left 4 Dead sort of like standardized this whole concept of like running mad, wild,
I think the Dawn of the Dead remake was before that, right? Because that took Dawn of the Dead and made it fast zombies.
Yeah.
But I think Left 4 Dead, people think like, oh, it's a zombie survival game. It's not really. It's just a horde game. Like you can go play that old Gears of War horde mode, and I mean, it's not you're trying to survive in all video games. You're trying to not get killed. So survival is more methodical in scavenging for supplies, dealing with threats in different ways, but not necessarily just fast-paced horde. Gunplay or whatever. Yeah,
because like it's, to me, the whole like fast zombie thing, it's reliant on jump scares, it's reliant on dexterity, and like just like fast paced fear, where it's like it's urgent. And I think that what I found creepy about zombies when I first started liking zombie literature and movies and stuff was the slow paced tension. Like I referenced Resident Evil. I can't say that. Resident Evil. I always say it fast, like one word. Resident Evil.
Resident Evil 2 is better though.
Yeah, Resident Evil. did a great job building that tension where you're walking through these dark corridors and you don't know which corner you turn around and there's going to be a zombie waiting for you and it shoots in your face.
Speaking of this, Resident Evil, we were talking about video games. The Resident Evil 2 remake was fantastic.
Yes.
And I don't have any idea why Capcom has not remade Resident Evil Outbreak. Like, Resident Evil Outbreak was one of the coolest video games ever.
Yeah. It was before its time, that's for sure.
If you're not familiar with it, it was a online cooperative Resident Evil game where you played as these nobody survivors. Like, there was a mechanic, a college student, a doctor,
a journalist.
There was a cop too, right?
There was a security guard and a cop. Yeah, Kevin was the cop. The Mark guy was the security guard.
But this was way back in the day, PlayStation 1.
No, it was PlayStation 2.
PlayStation 2. And there was no, like, voice chat, so like there was little emotes you could do in the game that would, like,
hey, come here, over here.
Stop,
watch out.
So you had to, like, do this voice chat with the characters, which was challenging, but it was kind of fun at the time. But
now they did have voice chat, but they chose not to allow it because they thought it was more. They thought the game would be too easy with the voice chat, which is silly because this is a thing with, like, Resident Evil, the IP in general. They always reference saying things like, oh, it's single player because it's got to be scary, and I hate that because, like, you can be in a scary atmosphere, but not just be scared. Like, I don't play Resident Evil to be scared. I just like the scary atmosphere, or like the creepy atmosphere.
And some people will still be scared with their playing with their friends. Like, it could still be scary.
Yeah, I think that game, we could have a whole episode based on dumb things we've done, like while we're in bands or like while we were just bums, not going to school and not having real jobs, quote unquote. But at that time when I bought PlayStation 2 just for that game, I had to buy the PlayStation 2 system, the hard drive expansion, and then the game itself, because I didn't have any of that stuff, but I had to have that game when it came out.
You did a memory card too, right?
Yeah, and we were in Autumn's Ascent at the time, and I was, like, not paying rent for the practice studio because I was broke because I had a part-time job, but I still had enough money to go out and buy all those things because I had to play Resident Evil Outbreak when it came out.
Yeah, that game was fantastic, and I think we actually busted it out like an emulator or something. We played it for a little bit on PC. It's still fun. Like,
it's still a cool game. It's still an awesome idea for a game. And with all these, like, different types of, like, live service games or just, like, online multiplayer games, it is wild that Capcom hasn't capitalized on that.
Especially when they did that one multiplayer one that was, like, competitive or something, right? Where
it was like the Dead by Daylight knockoff. That was Resident Evil or Resistance, ARI Resistance or whatever. And
I was like, man,
and that game had, it had the same system as Resident Evil 2, so it looked cool. The Resident Evil 2 remake,
Resident Evil 2 remake again, fantastic.
Yeah. So it had promise, but, like, just because they were trying to balance out this whole mastermind with all these different devices, it's just such a waste.
Yeah,
it's a waste.
People need to realize that players want to play games together. People want to cooperate. They want to compete all the time.
Yeah, and
especially in survival games. Come on.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back to, like, that premise of, like, a zombies overdone. It's a shame because they are. That's the problem. Is, like, I will concede they are overdone. So I get why people get sick of them, but I think it's a shame because people use them almost in my opinion incorrectly. But it leads to stuff where, like, the Resident Evil has gone away from zombies. They have vampires now and werewolves, all kinds of weird stuff with the newer games, which the newer games are great. They're great video games, but it's not what I want out of Resident Evil. I want Resident Evil Outbreak. I want Resident Evil the remake 2, those types of games. I think there's still room to do those well and better, but it's a shame because I think that there is that conception where it's like, zombies are overdone, and it's not the zombies themselves. It's just how they're done. It's like everything else,
Yep. They're not done the right way for us.
Yeah.
So
that's my thoughts on it. But everyone's got their own opinions, which is great because it's good that at least we talk about zombies because I don't think they're ever going to go away. They're always going to be popular. It's popular.
Tell us your thoughts. Go to the Facebook page and tell us why we're wrong.
Why do you
right.
hate zombies?
Why do you? What your thoughts are?
Why do you hate zombies? Why do you like zombies?
But, so I think that's pretty much it for.
What have you been watching? What have you been watching?
Been watching LinkedIn and looking for we actually just recorded the last episode, so I haven't been watching much.
Really?
I watched the presidential debate last night.
That's
I watched
the wrong podcast.
I've been actually watching. I went back to watch the whole show of Cheers a while ago.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm now watching Frasier, and I'm almost done with that. So I'm kind of catching up on sitcoms that I missed out on in my youth because I was watching other sitcoms. But I think that's the last thing
You watched the Beetlejuice movie, right?
Oh yeah, I went to go see the new Beetlejuice movie. I saw that. My daughter wanted to go see that. Beetlejuice. I thought it was entertaining. It wasn't. I don't know. Like it was. I don't have anything bad to say about it. I don't have anything amazing to say about it. It was fine.
It's kind of what I expect from when I saw the trailers. I was like, it's
I mean,
okay.
I love Michael Keaton, and he still had it. But there were some parts I wasn't a big fan of. But nothing really to complain about. I thought it was a fun movie.
Yeah, I think the only thing I've watched recently that's because I've been catching up on shows as well because I've been rewatching The Walking Dead while I paint miniatures. But I did watch. Actually, what I'm gonna say? I've been watching Peacemaker with my daughter, which I love Peacemaker. It's a fantastic show.
Is that appropriate for your daughter?
No,
I haven't seen it in a while.
Not at all. I mean, it's fine. She's watched so much stuff like that, and like I don't shelter my 12-year-old daughter from things because with kids with the internet, I mean, I'd rather them see things with me and they can ask questions as opposed to seeing it randomly and not knowing what certain things are. But the first episode, if anyone has watched Peacemaker, the first episode got a little awkward because I didn't realize totally forgot that there was a scene with him and a butterfly at her apartment, and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot this was in this episode. But otherwise, it's just an amazing
that was
show.
The first episode?
Yeah,
oh wow,
that was a spoiler. But yeah, amazing show, fantastic. John Cena's hilarious. James Gunn is going to do amazing things with DC. I cannot wait till he does Batman. But yeah, that's what we got for the zombie world. Things.
Do you know what the next episode is about yet?
It's going to be about Relic Myers and the Rhythms of Ruin.
The whole show?
No. Well, it might be related to it. I mean, that's release day. Like that's going to come out on release day.
Okay, well, it's music themed, so we'll do.
Yeah, we'll do a music retrospective.
We'll talk about music.
That was one of my ideas. Anyways, do like a Lauren Guard history episode or something, and just talk about
or
stuff.
Like high school or whatever. Like
because all that music stuff works into this stuff as well, video games and board games, and
we could talk about Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah. We'll figure it out. But yeah, thanks for hanging out with us in the graveyard here. And
again, if you have any questions or topics you want us to answer or talk about, feel free to let us know.
Yeah,
it sounds like Brady's son is home.
Oh yeah, you got to stomp it again. Yeah, I just realized the time it was. All right, well yeah, we'll catch you all later, and thanks for tuning in.
See ya.